Welcome all of you to join us at Startup Impact Summit, Innovation and SDG workshops. In this workshop, we are going to discuss which SDG do your startup align to. This is a workshop to showcase your impact. We are incredibly happy to have Ellie and Dinh-Long as our guest speaker today. They are from the Youth Collab, an initiative co-led by the UNDP Asia Pacific and City Foundation to economically empower the next generation in the region. They dedicate their work to the youth entrepreneurship and government innovation. The speaker will discuss what are the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, how to measure impact with your startup, corporation, or non-profit organizations. What are the tools and resources? Without further ado, join me in welcoming Ellie and Dinh-Long.
Hello, Leiho everyone. My name is Dinh-Long, and you can also call me Long. It's the same word in Cantonese to say dragon. I'm super happy to be part of the Startup Impact Summit 2020, and I'm now part of Youth Collab, which is a project co-led by UNDP and City Foundation, where we work with young people, ecosystem enablers, and governments to empower young people to address the SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals, through social innovation, social entrepreneurship, and leadership. So I will share my screen, and for this quick icebreaker before starting the session, we will play a little game called How Well Do You Know the SDGs? So we developed on our chatbot on the Youth Collab Facebook page a quick quiz to learn more about the SDGs. So yeah, it's this one. So you can either play with me at the same time, or you can also open this link on your browser, which will redirect you to this chatbot. So, okay, it's all set here. So on our chatbot, we developed many different quizzes and content to learn more about the SDGs. And today we're just gonna play what is called SDGs quiz. So yes, let's start the quiz. And so we will answer 7 questions related to SDGs. Feel free for each question to type your answer on the chat, so A, B, or C, sometimes D. So first question is very easy. How many SDGs are there? A, 9, B, 17, or C, 20? So it's very easy. It's answer B, obviously 17 goals. So let's continue. So type your answer on the chat. So question 2, what is SDG number 11? Is it A, clean water and sanitation? Is it B, climate action? Or is it C, sustainable cities and communities? So maybe let's try B again, climate action. So of course, no, B, climate action is goal number 13, while 11 was sustainable cities and communities. So let's go on the next question. How many targets are there? So it's a more tricky question. So is it A, 17? Is it B, 68? Is it C, 169? So type your answer on the chat, and yes, the answer is C, 169 targets. So next question, very, very easy. What is the main focus of the SDGs? Is it A, the people? Is it B, the planet? Or is it C, prosperity? Or D, all of the above? I'm sure you guessed it already. It's answer D, all of the above, the 3 pillars of sustainable development. So next question, question 5. The SDGs call for participation of A, everyone in big letters, B, private companies, C, governments, or D, citizens and NGOs. So very easy question again. It's obviously answer A, everyone. So next question is which SDG is the most important? Is it A, gender equality? Is it B, that they are all equally important? Is it C, climate action, or is D, quality education? So let's stick to climate action again. Let's try C. And Of course, wrong answer. All the goals are equally important. We cannot reach only one goal. We have to reach them all. So last question, what was the Global Development Framework before the SDGs? Is it A, the Millennium Development Goals? Is it B, the UN Global Aid Program? Or is it C, the Dinh-Long Global Development Framework? So I hope that it's C, but obviously it's answer A, Millennium Development Goals or MDGs. So yeah, thank you so much for playing the game. How well do you know the SDGs? Feel free to browse our chatbot where we have more interactive content for you to learn more about the SDGs. And we also have some online modules for your social enterprise. So if you want to develop more your social enterprise, feel free as well to go on the chatbot. So thank you so much, and I will pass it on to Ellie for her to begin the session.
Thanks so much for that. Hope everybody enjoyed the quiz, and please do share it with your friends. So yes, my name is Ellie Horrocks. I work with Dinh-Long in the Youth Collab team at UNDP. And as he mentioned, Youth Collab is co-led by UNDP and City Foundation. And our aim is to empower young people across Asia Pacific to achieve the SDGs through social entrepreneurship and innovation. And I know that many of you already have heard of the SDGs, many of you may already be aware of the SDGs, but how can we actually use that to measure and manage impact for startups? That's the focus of our topic today. And I really want to emphasize that, as Youth Collab, we support youth social impact startups from across Asia Pacific. So we're drawing on our experience of supporting these startups to think about how to measure and manage their impact and how to align with the SDGs. So I'm going to share my screen and okay, so Dinh-Long just gave you a refresher on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the 169 targets. And so today we want to really get into how startups can better align with the SDGs and what may be some of the benefits of doing so. So first of all, why should startups measure and manage their impact, the SDG impact? There's sort of two key reasons I'll highlight, and they're very interlinked. First of all, there's the moral imperative. So as you heard from the intro, the SDGs are a universal call to action to end poverty, to protect the planet, and to ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. So this is really a global call to action. But the problem is, we know countries in this region are not on track. We're not on track in Asia Pacific to achieve a single one of the 17 goals by 2030. And we only have 10 more years to go. And of course, now with COVID, this is threatening to send us further backwards. But I would also argue that it also presents a wake-up call and creates a disruption that could present pathways for new opportunities. So the goals call on all businesses, large and small, to maximize positive impacts and minimize negative impacts towards the SDGs. So that's the first reason. The second reason is the business case. Of course, in a general sense, we know that a more peaceful, prosperous, sustainable planet is good for commercial sustainability. But more specifically, the SDGs provide a shared impact framework for measuring business contributions to society. And they are really a global framework. I can't emphasize this enough. They apply to businesses large and small, and they apply to businesses that are just interested in mitigating, say, ESG risks, as well as to businesses that are looking to solve social problems. So they really are a global framework. To go through the business case in a bit more detail, why should startups care about aligning with SDG impact? The first reason is, of course, increasing attractiveness to a range of different investors. Of course, many startups are already having impacts along the SDGs in their communities, but they might not be speaking in the language of the SDGs. By aligning with SDG metrics, you're speaking to a global language and a global framework for impact. And that makes you more investable for a whole range of different investors, from institutional investors, impact investors, development finance, etc. The second reason is regarding your attractiveness to customers. We know that Gen Z customers in particular really care about the values of the businesses that they decide to spend their cash on. And so really communicating your SDG impacts can help to strengthen your reputation and your brand. The third point is linked. It's around your staff. Similarly, your staff care about the company they work for. They want to have an impact. They want to be spending their time with a company that aligns with their values. So really both achieving social impact and then communicating your social impact can help you to recruit and retain high quality talent. Then, of course, there's supply chain resilience. So by thinking about the impacts that you're having on the producers and suppliers and distributors in your supply chain, and really thinking about what you can do as a business to better support people, particularly those at the bottom of the economic pyramid, can really help you in the long run by boosting your resilience. And finally, of course, managing risks, both operational, reputational, and many others. This helps you not just to think about positive impacts, but also to think about mitigating harm and mitigating negative impacts. So let's just circle back a sec. Before we speak about SDG impact, I just want to mention what do we mean by impact in general. So impact we define as a change in an outcome caused by an organization. It can be positive or negative, and it can be intended or unintended. And impact management is the ongoing process of measuring impact in order to reduce the negative and increase the positive. So we know that businesses have impacts on people and planet in everything we do. We can't avoid that. What we can do is track these impacts and seek to reduce the negative and increase the positive. And this is where the word impact management comes in. So you may have heard of impact measurement, and that's quantifying the effects of your investments, your business decisions, your operations, and so on. Impact management actually means using the data on an ongoing basis to try and maximize the positive and mitigate the negative. And this is just something from the Impact Management Project, which is a global coalition of organizations who really came together to try and standardize and harmonize on impact management. And this captures the intentions for why enterprises might want to measure impact and why there's such a need to do so. So it captures it as A, B, or C. So A is just acting to avoid harm. For example, wanting to avoid regulatory penalties or ESG related risks, or wanting to mitigate against reputational damage. So that's the sort of base case. And the next one is benefit stakeholders. So wanting to know the effects that you're having on your employees, on your customers, on the communities that produce the goods or the in your supply chain. That would be category B. And finally, category C, actually wanting to go further and contribute solutions to social or environmental problems and have a positive impact on people and planet. So all these different intentions have to come into your impact management framework. And going really specifically into impact management, not just SDG impact management, but impact management in general. Of course, impact management is just a core part of good business. And I'm sure all of you have most of these building blocks of impact management in place, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to get the data to manage your business. So of course, impact management helps you to generate customer insights and then refine your product and service offerings. It helps you to access opportunities and make better decisions, helps you to manage your risks, build your brand as we spoke about, scale your impact and communicate your impact. And by communicating your impact, you're more able to access funding and partnerships. So I think it's important to recognize that SDG impact is something that can be incorporated into your existing impact management framework. I think the core pillars to strong impact management, and what we see from our experience working with startups who are trying to achieve SDG impact, first of all, it's grounded in a sound strategy with a clear theory of change for the impact you're trying to achieve. Everything else revolves around that. You really need to have that clear theory of change, or sometimes called an impact value chain, or a logic model, or some other kind of framework that is your strategy for impact. Then you need systems, tools, processes, people, and the right culture. And really the two have to go hand in hand. It's got to be an iterative process of using the data and feeding that back into the system, and actually using the insights that are generated to refine your strategy accordingly. And I know that impact management can often seem very overwhelming, particularly for startups who are time poor and cash strapped, and particularly at a time like this, dealing with unprecedented crisis and risks to their survival. But I think it's important to remember that it should be right-sized for your startup and it should add value to you. So rather than thinking about the whole universe of metrics that you could possibly measure, it's better to just do a few things well and actually use the data. So some of the techniques such as lean data and generating customer insights, they can both help you to communicate your SDG impact, but they also help you to just be more successful as a business. And it's worth mentioning that there's been an increasing harmonization and convergence in many of the practices and standards and metrics around impact management and measurement. I'm sure it still feels like there's too much of a proliferation, and that is definitely true, but there is more and more harmonization. And of course, the SDGs are the overarching framework. This is something from Impact Management Project, who I mentioned before, and this was again part of this harmonization effort. So really looking at all the different ways in which we think about impact and categorizing them across these 5 dimensions of what, who, how much, contribution, and risk. And that really helps us to standardize so that we're speaking in the same language when we're looking at startups from across the world and companies from across the world working in very different sectors, business models, etc. Okay, so that's enough of the overview. Now we're going to get really into how you can do this as a startup. And we're going to post some links in the description below so that you can follow along and that you can also take this forward on your own time. This is going to be a real whistle-stop tour, but hopefully it will give you some of the key principles to keep in mind. So when it comes to capturing your SDG impact, presumably you have an existing business model and a strategy, and you have some building blocks in place. You have some ways of capturing data, some ways of generating customer insights, some ways of assessing your risks, etc. So how do you go beyond that and really start to align with the SDGs and capture, measure, and communicate your SDG impact? So this is just a very, very high level checklist of the process, and then we'll go through in a bit more detail. So the first step is really to define your impact goals and to link them to the SDGs. And I'll go through in a second how to do that. Then develop or refine, if you already have one, your theory of change for impact. So you might have these SDGs at the highest level, but they are very high level goals and the targets underpin them are very high level. So what is your theory of change for getting there? And I'll go through that as well. Then you want to identify the relevant indicators and start to develop an impact management framework. And those indicators, there are lots of different ways in which you can standardize them to global metrics, which mean that you're speaking in the same language that impact investors and others are using. And finally, you actually want to collect the data. You want to measure the impact, and that's both quantitative and qualitative. And then there's got to be a feedback loop, actually using the data to inform your business decisions. Okay, so first of all, how can you define your impact goals? So as I mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goals is the overarching common framework. And that is very helpful because it's a common language that we can all work to. And there are many ways of capturing those goals. So I'm just going to navigate to, we'll post these links in the chat. You can go to sustainabledevelopment.un.org/SDGs. And you can browse around and think about which goals your business is contributing to. So for example, if I navigate into affordable and clean energy, then I can look at the different targets and indicators. So as Dinh-Long mentioned, there is a huge number of targets and indicators, but within each goal, there's really not that many. So for example, you can see here, we've got 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, A and B. And you could think about, right, well, what is my startup contributing towards? Which targets am I directly contributing to? And remember, it's never going to be, it's very unlikely to be just one. Your business model will be having many different impacts on communities, on people, both as your customers, but also your employees, your suppliers, your distributors. So you want to think about all the different impacts of your business model. For example, you may be having impacts on gender equality, goal 5, on no poverty, goal 1, You might also be in some way reducing inequalities, goal 10. So really have a browse and think about which goals you're contributing to. Okay, so once you've thought about which goals you're contributing to, your business model contributes to, there are many different platforms that will actually help you to really track the indicators. So examples of these are Iris Plus and the Business Call to Action Impact Lab. And we've also developed a simple template which we'll share in the description below as well. So this is the Business Call to Action Impact Lab. I'll also just show you that. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You can navigate around. This is also housed, BCTA, Business Call to Action, is also housed by UNDP. You can navigate around and look at which SDGs you're contributing towards, and then look at the specific targets and indicators below. You can select the targets, and then through the Business Call to Action Impact Lab, you can start to develop an impact management framework. Another good example is Iris Plus. So Iris Plus is under the Global Impact Investing Network, and they have a similar dashboard, which we'll also share, where you can look at which SDGs align with your impact priorities, and then go through and see the targets and indicators below. Okay, so you can also use the template which we've provided, which is, I'll show it here, where you can drag and drop the different goals that you're contributing towards, and this can be a really nice way of presenting your impact to different stakeholders. Okay, now we're going to speak about theory of change. So theory of change, as I mentioned, is really the underpinning strategy for how you're going to achieve SDG impact, and it has to link all the way from the activities that you're doing on the ground all the way through to the SDGs that you've defined that you're supporting. So first of all, once you've defined your impact goals, as we did in the last step, you want to identify the problem you're trying to address through your business. And you want to really make this specific to a target population, stakeholders, both people and planet. And then you want to really think about what is the entry point that you are using to create impact. Is it through the product or the service? Is it through a combination of the two? Is it through investments that you're making? What is your entry point to creating this impact? And then this is the hardest part. You want to consider all the key steps in that impact value chain, from how you go from your inputs and your activities all the way through to the SDGs. And then finally, at each stage, there's going to be a lot of assumptions in your theory of change. These are things that are outside of your control or partially outside of your control, which could either prevent the impact or could enable the impact from occurring. Okay, so here is an example, just to make it simpler, and you can follow along in the template and see how you can use this for your own business. So for example, this startup is a renewable energy, a solar energy startup. And you can start by thinking about the SDG goals or thinking about the problems. The two go hand in hand because the reverse of the problem is the goal. So for example, in this setting, the problems are lack of access to electricity, high cost of energy, often dirty energy, high poverty levels, unpaid care burden on women, and also other impacts on livelihoods, incomes, low incomes, etc. And then at the goal level, the SDGs that have been identified through the solution is affordable and clean energy, infrastructure, because this is also helping to build a stronger ecosystem and build a stronger market for solar energy, climate action, because it's cutting down carbon emissions, gender equality, because the business is having a particular impact on women who are having to use dirty fuels and also then losing out on time on income generating activities, and no poverty. Then this is a very simplified version, but really you need to think about all the different steps along the chain. So for example, at the level of inputs and activities, this is all the resources that you're allocating towards the activity. So it includes your staff, your distributors, partners, the actual product and service offering that you've developed. And then outputs is the direct result of your activities. So this level of the theory of change is in our control. So it's got to be things which you as a business are directly accountable for and responsible for. If you were not there, these outputs would not occur, is another way of putting it. So this would be the sales of your products, the uptake of your services, customer awareness of your product, and customer satisfaction with your product. And there could be many more as well. This is just an example. Outcome level is one stage higher up. So it's things that are partially in your control, but that also depend on other enabling factors. So this could be the uptake of the product among rural households, the increased access to renewable energy, and the cost savings. And then the impact finally is all the things which directly lead to the SDG goals, and that you can directly see the targets and the indicators under each of these goals reflected in these impacts. So for example, reduce carbon emissions under climate action, improve living standards, changes in income, and gender impacts as well. Just to quickly go through again, I'll just emphasize, you can download this template from the Youth Collab website, and you can try and develop a simple theory of change for your startup. You can also, on the page before, you can see the template for picking your impact goals, and you can navigate to all the dashboards I shared for identifying which targets and indicators you are directly contributing to. This can then end up into a simple 2-pager, which will communicate your SDG impact. So even if you're a startup that's not necessarily thought about it in this way before, I am sure that in some way in your business model, you can think through how you're contributing to some of these goals. Now, this is just one part of an impact management framework. The other things obviously will take more time and go in lots of detail, but we'll share links to how you can take forward those aspects as well. So just to reiterate, this is really some of the benefits of impact management for startups. And I think there's a huge value in startups that maybe are working in sectors that aren't social enterprises necessarily, to still think about the ways in which they are mitigating harm and maximizing positive impact across the SDGs. So don't think that this isn't relevant for you. Really, it's a global call and it's on all of us. And here, as you can see, are some of the very specific benefits of why you should prioritize this. We will also share some more resources. So of course, Youth Collab, as I mentioned, we're working across Asia Pacific in over 25 countries, and we work with governments, partners, all different players to try and create the right ecosystem for youth social entrepreneurship to thrive. And we also directly support social impact startups led by young people working in a range of sectors that directly contribute to the SDGs, for example, health, education, energy and water and sanitation, many of the others. We also will share with you these links to a number of other resources for where you can go to both learn more about the SDGs and also take some self-directed modules and free platforms to see how you can directly align with the SDGs. That's it. That's it from me. So I'll pass back to Joe, and thank you so much for joining us with this session.